Zdravo guys, and welcome to Belgrade, the big bad capital of Serbia here in the Balkans. Today we're doing our what's going on in Serbia video, the videos I love to make. We're gonna walk around and talk a little history, a little current events, a little politics, and most importantly, we're gonna get the vibe, the feeling of what it's like to be here in Belgrade, why it's a city you should definitely come and visit, and why I'm here in the first place. We'll discover if it's safe, if it's cheap, and if it's worth visiting. So if that sounds good to you guys, let's do it. So 4 years ago, when I was a young, dumb traveler, Serbia was the first place that I came in the Balkans and the first place that I really experienced what this mashup of Balkan life is. The question we're gonna answer now is, what is Serbia? Who are the Serbians? And why is it important to know? For me, Serbia is kind of that front line where Europe smashed into the Ottoman Empire, and you get this very strange remnants of the Turks being here, but in a very European sense. If you go to Bosnia, you go to Albania, you go to Macedonia, the Turkish presence there is really felt a lot more. Here, it is very Serbian. It is very Serbian first, Serbian forward, and the remnants of the Turkish Ottoman thing here is kind of just like you find it in the food, you find it a little bit in the language. Other than that, they've really taken it away. The Serbs, first and foremost, are Slavs. That means they are the southern brothers of the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Polish. They speak a language, Serbian, that is very close to those other languages. It shares a lot of the same roots. And the entire region, the Balkan region that used to make up the former Yugoslavia, speaks Serbian. The very confusing part is that, of course, there's dialects between the different places, whether you're in Bosnia, Croatia, Montenegro, but they actually nationally identify with the language as opposed to saying that they speak Serbian. So in Bosnia, they speak Bosnian, even though Bosnian and Serbian are basically mutually intelligible. It's the same, kind of more or less, than British English and American English. It would be like Americans saying we speak American, and in England they speak English, and in Australia they speak Australian. That's the kind of thing here that's going on in the Balkans specifically. If there's one thing you've got to know about Serbia, is that the Serbs are a proud people. They're a proud Slavic people, they're a proud Eastern Orthodox people, and they are a proud historical people. The Serbs, as we know it, have basically been in this area for over 1,000 years. There was Serbian kingdoms, Serbian empires, Serbian despotates, Serbian socialist states, Yugoslav states, and all of that good stuff, which leaves this area with a very, very strong national identity. The Serbs were always pesky nationalists, and even during different occupations, whether it was the Hungarians trying to take over this land or the Ottomans trying to take over this land, Serbia was always one of the kingdoms that was the proud Christian kingdom that pushed back against the invaders. They were known to have lots of very bloody revolutions when it comes to the Ottoman occupation, and the Ottomans made them pay dearly. But if you guys watched the Niche episode before, they were very proud of this, and this is something that made Serbia such a strong national state today. For me, Serbia is a big jumble. What I mean by that is that the history here has so many faces and so many colors. You can find buildings that represent the imperial times. You can find buildings built by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You can find buildings built by the Serbian Empire. You can find buildings built by the Ottomans. You can find old castles that have been here for 500, 600, 700 years, built by the old people who defended this land against the Muslim incursion of the Ottomans. You can find Yugoslav buildings, and you can find the scars of socialism here. You can find new things and old things and beautiful things. And I think that's why this capital city specifically is so interesting, because there's so much going on here. So many people have passed through here, put their hands on this place, and turned it into something quite special. This history you can really feel here because, for example, here we have something imperial, something royal, something that was built quite a long time ago for the empire. And then here you have the old post office of the Yugoslav times, very different stylistically, all on the same street. We have Yugoslav buildings down here, and then if you go here, you'll find more imperial buildings. So the next place I'm going to take you guys is something really important for the identity of Serbia and the Serbian people, and that is its identity as an Orthodox country, Eastern Orthodox to be specific. This church that we're coming up to is the St. Sava Cathedral. It was built in the early 1930s, right when Yugoslavia was becoming basically a state. And the church was built on the remains of Saint Sava, who was the founder of the Eastern Orthodox Church here in Serbia. This church is absolutely incredible, and it's absolutely massive. The dome at the top here is 30 meters off the ground. It has a huge golden picture of Jesus in the very Orthodox style, and the entire place is absolutely covered in gold and blues in beautiful mosaic, and it's such a phenomenal piece of architecture here in the city. The interesting part about this church in particular is it's one of the most important Eastern Orthodox churches in the world now. When the Turks converted the Hagia Sophia, which was basically the most important pilgrimage site for Eastern Orthodox with regard to that, into a mosque, this became kind of the preordained church that people go to for pilgrimage now. When construction started in the early 1930s, they were trying to plan how they would go about it, and they decided that they wanted the architecture to mimic that of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. When you're inside the church, you can really see the history, you can really see the connection to the Orthodox Church in Istanbul, but more importantly, you can see how much money they have put into this thing. It is absolutely ornate beyond belief, and it is really crazy that they're still working on this almost 100 years later. They're still laying out bricks, they're still finishing the amazing artwork that they have inside. A kind of interesting final note is that Putin actually came here in 2009 and consecrated this church as one of the most important places for the Eastern Orthodox people, and he invested a lot of money from the Russian state into the church itself. He was supposed to come back in 2020 to rededicate all the money that had been spent, but obviously he wasn't able to, so maybe one day we'll see Putin back here in Serbia. I think with regards to modern day Serbia, the most important and defining factor of its identity today was Yugoslavia, which was a socialist communist state that was founded under Tito, who is nationally renowned here as quite a good guy for a lot of people. And that lasted basically from right before World War II until its dissolution in the early 2000s. And of course, the really bloody and terrible war that happened as Yugoslavia broke up. The reason why there's a lot of contention politically today with Serbia is because of how devastating and how terrible the breakup of the Yugoslav Federation was. While some countries like Slovenia and Macedonia were able to kind of leave without much of a trace, Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia plunged into a terrible civil war, split along ethnic lines, and of course religious lines, specifically with the Bosnians being Muslim and the Croatians being more or less Catholic. People who have lived next to each other for 50 plus years, friends, Slavs, declared war on each other and absolutely did their best to destroy any sort of relationship that they had. The harsh truth about what happened in the Yugoslav war is that the Serbs and Croats were both incredibly brutal and violent towards the Bosnians. Of course, the Bosnians were killing people and it was a war, but there was serious ethnic cleansing happening and even what some might say genocide. This still stains a bit the reputation of Serbia today, and the remnants you can certainly feel historically, and you can feel it in the Balkan neighbors' idea of Serbia, of Croatia, and of Bosnia today. Bosnia itself is almost a shell country, being split up between these ethnic minorities, the Muslims, the Catholics, and the Eastern Orthodox. And there's even a small republic inside of Bosnia called the Republic of Srpska, which is almost autonomous, which are the technically ethnic Serbians that still live in Bosnia. I'll do a bigger video about this because it's actually quite important. But this kind of breaking up of brothers is something called balkanization, which is the idea that you can have very similar ideas that are very polarizing. And these people, for at least my opinion as a foreigner, and for if you come to this region, they eat very similar food, they speak a very similar language, they all have great hospitality, Their cities are lovely. I love being down here, but there's so much national hate in these countries. And luckily, it's kind of moving past that. A lot of the younger generation now don't see the Bosnians as enemies or the Croats as enemies, but just Slavic brothers. But for the older generation that saw their buildings burned down, their churches and mosques destroyed, that saw ethnic cleansing and violence, it's really hard to get over that in just a generation, as this happened in the early 2000s. Out of all the countries in the Balkans, Serbia is probably the one that dislikes the United States the most and that likes Russia the most. So the reason for that is that the Russians gave a lot of help, of course, to the Serbian Empire through different wars. There's actually over here a statue to Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia. And the reason that the Americans are typically disliked, you know, not like everybody hates Americans, but it's just like this overall fervor, is the United States as well as NATO decided to do something quite late about the Yugoslav war, the last land war in Europe, if you're not counting Ukraine. And NATO bombed quite a bit of things here in Belgrade, but especially around Serbia, killing obviously lots of fighters and lots of people. So people here are very, at least you can see, we're very anti-Clinton, because Clinton was the president during that time, and it was his decision to bomb the Serbs. And this is one of the semi-pro-Trump countries that you can find in Europe, which was interesting. Secondary factor that makes Serbia, I would say, quite a challenging country politically is Kosovo. So for those of you that don't know, Kosovo is basically a part of Serbia that broke off kind of like around 2008. They established their own country, but Serbia, as well as almost half the world, don't recognize Kosovo as an individual nation. It was a bit of a bloody war. A lot of people got kicked out of that region, and it's very complicated because because Kosovo has a lot of Albanians. I was in Kosovo, and the city I went to, it would be really hard for you to tell me that is not Albania. They were flying Albanian flags, they were flying the Kosovar flag, everyone speaks Albanian and Turkish. It's very different than here in Serbia, but of course the closer that you get to Serbia, the more it becomes Serbian. So if you go to a city called Mitrovica, a lot of Serbians living there, they're flying the Serbian flag, and it's a complicated one. I have no particular opinion on it. As a traveler, I'm trying not to take any stances in this region. I love all the Balkan brothers together, but it's very contentious, and if you bring this up with certain people, they get very, it's a very hard line in the sand. It's kind of like the Democrat and Republic situation in the United States. The Kosovo situation, there's two sides, and if you're not on one, you're on the wrong side. That being said, moving away from the politics, is Serbia safe? Serbia is incredibly safe. Everyone here is very nice, very helpful. The only things that you might have that kind of are not great here is the taxis. Some of the taxis are run by mafios, I guess. So you can take car apps if you want to. That's probably better than actually getting a real taxi. But in general, everyone here is really nice. It's really safe. The only thing that this place has, which is quite common in the Balkans, are a lot of gypsies who are homeless, I guess. So they're not homeless. It's a very complicated story. I can do a whole video about gypsies actually, but they often ask you for things. They don't normally steal things, but I've heard that sometimes that can happen. So just be aware of the people on the street. Watch your wallet sometimes. The second thing we always try to answer is it cheap? I would say affordable is probably the better word. If you're comparing it to Europe standards, it's definitely cheaper than Western Europe, but if you're comparing it to Balkan standards, it's certainly more expensive than other Balkan countries. The capital city of Albania, Tirana, was maybe like 1/3 cheaper. Skopje, Macedonia was certainly cheaper. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a little bit cheaper, but that's really just the prices here in Belgrade itself. If you go out of the country, it's certainly not very expensive, and unless you're going to the main like 2 or 3 places that people visit as tourists here in Belgrade, it's probably not that expensive overall, especially if you're looking at American standards. So we're gonna say affordable. So moving away from the controversies here in Serbia, I wanna talk about something positive, something that everyone can agree is good, which is Chavopi, the very national Balkan dish, something super delicious. So I'm at the bus station near the central market here, and we're gonna go see what kind of grilled meats we can get in this mouth. So I'm taking you to this real hole in the wall place. It's called Venčac in central Belgrade. So Here we go, guys. We've got the Chavop. These are small. Sometimes it's beef, sometimes it's pork, sometimes it's a mix. Little patties, they grill them up. This is one portion. So we got 10 of these guys. Onions and a little cucumber always. We've got some roasted peppers. Look at those. Those look awesome. And some simple bread. In most cities, this is gonna cost around $3 to $4. Here, it's gonna cost me around like $5–6 because we're in the city center. But this is like the really traditional stuff. Everybody loves this in Serbia. This is the best part about Serbia for me, is the delicious grilled meats, the delicious grilled foods, and the very nice ladies in there making it for you. You know, they're that Slavic spirit. So let's try it. So let's go for a little Chavop here. You guys can see it. Look at that. You really get that grill smell. That's what it's all about. That's what Serbia is all about. And this is what's going on in Serbia. It's beefy, it's fatty, it's grilled to perfection. It's just so good. It's always so good. Like, Serbia's all about the simple things. If you can do the simple things right, and here we have some fried pepper. So they fry it, then they char it, then they take it out. It's really nice and tender. And then I think we've got some garlic in there. It smells delicious. Let's see. Oh, delicious. Everything here is so smoky and delightful. Very happy about it. Our last spot now is the Kalemegdan Fortress, which is the large fortress that sits on the banks of the Danube and the Sava River, where they come together. And I will leave you guys here. This has been the What's Going On in Serbia video. It's a wonderful place. You've got beautiful sights to see, old stuff, new stuff, and everything in between. So, hope you guys learned something new. Hope you guys will come to Serbia soon. And that'll do it for me from Belgrade. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. That all really helps me out. We've got some more content coming from Serbia all over the place. And then who knows where we're gonna be next. We've got lots of things to do here, lots of things to see. So, hvala, that's thank you in Serbian, and živeli, cheers from Belgrade.